Well, good afternoon. I returned from Los Angeles last night, and the devastation out there is catastrophic in California. Thousands of houses, schools, businesses burned to the ground. Communities wiped out, lives lost, families forever changed. They're the worst fires to ever hit Los Angeles, ever. And as soon as these fires broke out, I approved the Fire Management Assistance Grants. That's a term of art and how we get help to local officials. These grants cover California's firefighting costs for things like firefighting equipment, firefighters' salaries, and special capabilities like aircraft. Next, yesterday I immediately approved Governor Newsom's request for what they call, and I know this is all sounds like government talk, but it's called the Major Disaster Declaration. This declaration allows folks, at the request of the governor, the declaration allows folks who have been impacted to get immediate cash assistance to cover things like everything from groceries to baby formula to prescriptions. Because as you've seen and you've reported, a lot of these places are burned to the ground. There's not a single thing left in their homes. And so if they contact disasterassistance.gov, anybody who's lost everything or anything of consequence, disasterassistance.gov or 1-800-2, I beg your pardon, 1-800-621-3362. That's what they, disasterassistance.gov, 1-800-621-3362 to get the kind of help they need for everything from the basics that they don't have access to right now. And this morning, due to the magnitude of the disaster, I was talking with the governor, and he requested if I could increase the federal funding that was authorized under this legislation from 75% to 90%. We're increasing it to 100% of all the costs to be covered by the federal government for both the fire management assistance grants and the elements of what they call the disaster declaration. So today I'm announcing that the federal government will cover 100% of the cost for 180 days. This is going to pay for things like debris and hazard material removal, temporary shelters, first responders' salaries, and all necessary measures to protect life and property. And folks, I want to underscore, I told the governor and local officials, spare no expense to do what they need to do and contain these fires and in their communities that are really been devastated. And we're doing literally everything we can at a federal level. That's also why I call this group of folks around this table of all relevant federal departments and agencies together to discuss what more we can do. And some of the folks around the screen as well. Before we begin things, here's an update on where things stand right now. First, we focused on helping contain these fires. Over the last 24 hours, the United States Forest Service, working with state and local responders, has suppressed over 50 fire starts. And the fire in the Hollywood Hills has been contained by brave firefighters risking their lives. Right now, 3 major fires are still burning in the Pacific Palisades, in Pasadena, and in Sylmar. I want to be clear. What I know from talking to the governor, that there are concerns out there that there's also been a water shortage. The fact is, the utilities understandably shut off power because they're worried the lines that they carried energy were going to be blown down and spark additional fires. But the Cal Fire, and when it did that, it cut off the ability to generate pumping the water. That's what caused the lack of water in these hydrants. And so Cal Fire is bringing in generators to get these pumps up and working again so that there's no longer a shortage of water coming out of these hydrants. I'm also surging all federal resources possible to Southern California, including 400 additional federal firefighters, over 30 firefighting helicopters and planes, federally supplied, firefighting planes and helicopters, and 8 Department of Defense C-130s that are equipped to suppress wildfires. Today, the Secretary of Defense also authorized 500 wildfire ground clearing personnel from the Defense Department. And I've directed the department to continue working with Governor Newsom to identify additional resources that can be provided for public safety and security. And we've secured additional firefighters and firefighting aircraft from our ally in Canada as well. I also want everyone in Southern California to know we're going to keep at it. We're sticking with this. We expect there may be a temporary break in the winds, but in some areas the winds are likely to continue well into next week. And so we're going to continue to sending everything, literally, every resource we can find that's appropriate to help the governor and the first responders. Second, we're focused on helping people who have been displaced or in many cases lost everything. You've reported on, you've seen the homes just burned to the ground, whole areas burned to the ground, large areas. They've been displaced and they've lost everything. As I said, since the fire started, FEMA has been working with the state to help residents get shelter, groceries, prescriptions, and other critical goods like baby formula. We're also sent FEMA Director Criswell to Los Angeles to manage our response on the ground. She was supposed to be on this call, but we have the deputy here because she is out in the field with the governor right now, surveying what's going on. Let me close with a message to the people of Southern California. We are with you. We're not going anywhere. To the firefighters and first responders, you are heroes. Many of these firefighters are out there risking their lives, and some, well, I won't go beyond that, but risking their lives, and while their own homes are in danger, their families are in danger. To the firefighters and first responders, you really are, it's not hyperbole, you're heroes. You're genuinely heroes. And the worst, this is the most widespread, devastating fire in California's history. It's amazing. And there's nobody who understands it better than the press have been covering this on a minute-to-minute basis. And you literally have to run into the flames, these firefighters. You know, that old expression, God made man, then he made a few firefighters. Who runs into flames? You know, in doing so, you're leaving your own families and who may be in harm's way as well. So we owe you. And we're going to make sure that you get every resource you need, every possible resource you need. You know, to the families who have been impacted by this disaster, you're living through a nightmare, I know. And I promise you, we're going to help you get through this and eventually recover and rebuild. I want to turn it over now to the Vice President before we go on to the folks in the various cabinet positions as well as agencies that control these issues. Madam Vice President, I know you're directly affected, so you fire away. No pun intended.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. President, and also for the work that everyone around this table has been doing with the appropriate sense of urgency, because this is an urgent matter. What we have seen in California, and in particular in Southern California, is apocalyptic in terms of the nature of it and the unprecedented nature of it as well. And what we are seeing is a situation that is extremely dynamic. It is very much in play, and to some degree unpredictable, because we are literally waiting to see which way the wind blows. And I cannot praise enough the local leaders, most of whom I have talked with, and in particular our firefighters, who, as the President has said, they are working around the clock. They are working 12-hour, even longer shifts, and they are doing it with a sense of optimism, but also with an understanding of how serious this moment is and how important their work is to real lives and real people. Thousands of families have been displaced. Many of those families with young children with nowhere to go. And what we know is that this is a matter of current urgency, but this is also something that is going to have an impact for months and years to come. And on that point, I will also make note of the fact that, sadly, many insurance companies have canceled insurance for a lot of the families who have been affected and will be affected, which is only going to delay or place an added burden on their ability to recover. And I think that is an important point that must be raised, and hopefully there can be some way to address that issue, because these families, so many of them, otherwise will not have the resources to recover in any meaningful way. And many of them have lost everything. In the midst, however, of all of the trauma that has occurred, we have seen extraordinary acts of heroism. I am hearing countless stories of strangers helping strangers. People who are opening their homes where they are intact and have not had to evacuate, opening their homes to neighbors, to friends of neighbors, feeding them and providing shelter for them. And I do think that it speaks to the best of who we are as a country, which is in times of crisis, we find the heroes among us who we may not have known before, but act out of a sense of courage, but also a sense of community. And I applaud all those who are approaching this crisis with that spirit. And the bottom line is this: there are incredible heroes every day who are working right now in California on the front lines of this fire, and in particular, I want to thank the firefighters for all they are doing. They are, as the president said, putting themselves in harm's way, and they are doing the work that is about helping people who are perfect strangers to them, and doing it in some of the highest moments of need that anyone could face. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz Sherwood-Randall.
Turn it back to me.
Okay, back to the president.
Look, I've had a chance to speak with a lot of the elected officials, including the senators, some of the congresspersons in the region, as well as the vice president as well. And I want to be clear that one of the reasons I've asked this larger group to get together is because they control the very agencies that are needed from a federal level to get things done. And you know, we're in a situation where the U.S. Forest Service Chief, Randy Moore, is here. And he's going to provide an update in the fire situation in Los Angeles and discuss how the U.S. Fire Service, the U.S. Forest Service, is assisting Los Angeles and the state of California with fighting the wildfire, including the action his team has taken to suppress new fire starts. So, Chief, why don't you fire away?
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam Vice President. It's great to see you. I, too, consider California my home.
Yes.
And so it's great to be here to talk about this dramatic situation that we have. So the Forest Service and the Department of Interior are actively engaged in supporting the response to the wildfires in Southern California. And there are 4 major fires that we currently have going on. The Forest Service is in unified command with the LA County as well as other local city agencies. We are looking at the Eaton, the Hearst, and the Lydia. And if you look at that area there, that's the northernmost part of that area where the fires are taking place. The Palisades Fire, which CAL FIRE is in control of. And then we have a new start, which is this Sundown Fire that just started last night. And it also has the potential to expand quite significantly just based on the location it's at, but also the winds that are expected to continue. Right now, when I look at the mutual aid system in California, I want you to know that it's second to none in terms of how that system works and how it really moves to activate federal firefighting community and how it is activated and engaged. You know, every year we prepare for these Santa Ana winds. It's just that what is happening now is happening sooner. It's happening at a time now where we normally are at our lowest point in the fire year. And the fact that these fires are taking place now, it says that there are things that are going on in our climate that is creating truly year-round fire situations, and it's something that we all need to be mindful of, and this is a good indication of that. To give you an example, that if a fire starts from any ignition source during these Santa Ana winds, it has the potential for explosive growth and spread. And when that happens under these wind-driven conditions, it's very difficult to control. Now, in addition to this, when these winds are high, the aviation resources cannot fly. So it limits a lot of the potential area of support. As of this morning, there were over 4,000 firefighters that was assigned to these large fires. 600 or so were currently federal work, which means Forest Service and Department of Interior. And that doesn't include many who are assigned to their home units to provide initial attack. To give you an idea of the unsung heroes in these fire type conditions, in the last 24 hours, we've had 50 starts, and the initial attack success has been wonderful. So we've stopped a potential for 50 additional fires to be added to these 4 significant fires that we currently have. And that's what I mean by having initial attack crews stay put or pre-positioned across the state based on intelligence that we're gathering. And so I wanted to mention that because we talk about the active fire suppression, but there's so much that takes place behind the scenes that limits the amount of fires that our firefighters are having to respond to. The President did an excellent job of mentioning all of the resources that's available and that are assigned to the fire. I won't go over those, but we have a number of equipment that's out there that when the winds allow us, we'll be in the air fighting those fires. We also have a number of private contract crews that we're working with. We're working wonderfully with the state, county, and other federal firefighters, also the tribal firefighters as well in the communities. And we're looking at these MAFs, which we call the Modular Area Firefighting System Air Tankers. There's 8 of them. And there were, like I said, this time of the year, we're not ready for that. But within the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll have all 8 that's available for assistance. These aircrafts require lead planes to lead them into these fires. And so we're having to go through that whole process and ramp up really quick to get the inspections in, the check rides, so that these are qualified and are able to go. We're also working with our Canadian partners to mobilize 2 CL-415. These are water scoopers. They will clear customs on Monday, and they will be available after they clear federal inspections and the check rides. An important thing to know is that these aviation resources require a lot of support in the form of mechanics, airport space, helicopter managers, area supervisions. And so we work with our state and local and federal agencies to identify these aviation support resources to be sure that we can respond effectively. Now, I had mentioned the amount of fires that we've responded to in the last 48 hours, and I mentioned the 50 fires in the last 24 hours. We continue to have new starts. We're continuing to monitor the types of activities. We have about 8,000 firefighters on standby to add to this if need be. Right now, we are going to monitor the number of aircraft and firefighters we have in that small space. Because as you can imagine, there's only so much you can put in a space before you create other challenges there. The airspace in that area is pretty tight. You have commercial airports and others in that area. You also, unfortunately, have drones in the air, which is a concern to our pilots and to the safety of the aircraft, and so we have to be mindful of that. I only bring it up to let you know that this is not a very easy environment to operate within. Our firefighters, both federal, state, and local, and tribal, are doing just an outstanding job in what I consider to be some significant challenges in a significant environment. I think as I look at some of the questions that you may tend to ask, it's typical that the causes of fires isn't known immediately because resources are really focused on response. However, all the fire causes are investigated, and I want to be upfront with that. Each one of these fires will be investigated to see what the cause and origins of them are. And what we know now is that it would be unusual for there to be lightning-caused fires in Southern California at this time of the year. Fire investigations are the responsibility of the jurisdiction on where the fire starts, and we're ready to assist with this if and when needed. Thank you all.
Thank you. Randy, tell me about the conditions that we're dealing with on the ground. What's most concerning to you?
Most concerning right now is the wind, because the wind is limiting our ability to put aircraft in the air. Aircraft will not put that fire out, but it gives our firefighters, our boots on the ground, a really good opportunity to put the fire out with a little help from retardant and water drops. With these Santa Ana winds, you know, what's interesting about this part of California, these Santa Ana winds comes off the ocean usually in the mornings, and then you have the sundowner winds in the afternoon pushing the wind back the other way. And so while you're fighting to stop the fire this way in the morning, you're also fighting to stop the fire from coming back at you in the afternoon. The sundowner winds are not significant as we speak, but those are the challenges we have in that part of California. And so again, our firefighters are doing just an outstanding job of working in that type of environment, which their lives are really at risk pretty significantly under these conditions.
Thank you. I told you Administrator Griswold is off with the governor and inspecting some of these areas. So we have Bob Fenton. Bob, can you hear me? Hello, Bob.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, I hear you.
Fire away.
You hear me, sir? I'm there. So the administrator is with right now the governor, the mayor of LA, county, local officials, getting a briefing on the fire to really understand what the needs are as we move forward, not only with regard to the firefight, which Chief Moore was talking about, but also to regard to support the population displaced. Over 360,000 under mandatory evacuations, hundreds of thousands more with warnings. And so what we're doing now is ensuring that that we're able to provide any support to provide mass care to individuals, any assistance for the sheltering, any assistance for feeding, and then through the programs that we provide through our individual assistance that you authorized through the declaration, we're able to assist individuals with funding to offset their hotel costs. So applying to FEMA on the 1-800-621-3362 number is important, or disasterassistance.gov. We're sending teams out to the shelters. We know that there'll be a huge need after fires for mental health specialists, and working with HHS on providing that. As the Vice President talked about, insurance is problematic in California, especially with the fires. And so not only do some of the changes in our authorities help now with those that are underinsured, which you see more and more, but we want those that are insured to start seeking assistance to their insurance companies. Our programs can help individuals, especially displaced and who have lost their homes, with rental assistance until they can rebuild, and ultimately provide temporary housing. So we're in discussions with state and local governments on how we will meet those housing needs, both in the interim by using available stockage here, but how can we help rebuild? And then lastly, I would just say that we're really focused on already starting to discuss debris removal and all the hazardous waste that comes from fire and how to remove that safely between local, state, and federal government. We'll rely on federal partners, US EPA, the Corps of Engineers, and others to be part of that, that technical assistance help to support the safe removal so that ultimately we could rebuild. And one of the things that we will start doing in the next couple of days is starting that discussion on how do we rebuild, and not only rebuild, but rebuild more resilient and bring together state, local, and federal agencies to start that discussion in the weeks to months ahead. And so right now we're focused on meeting the immediate needs of those displaced, but already starting to work on recovery and rebuild and bringing all our authorities and the full weight of the federal government and all the resources that you've authorized to help California in that endeavor.
Bob, what do you think is the biggest challenge?
Also, I got...
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think the biggest challenge is going to be the mental health stress that is put on individuals that have lost everything. Fires are, so drastic. They destroy everything very quickly. Individuals don't have a lot of notice to leave, and so I think there's going to be a significant mental health strain, followed by a need to help individuals recover and rebuild. And the Vice President is exactly right. I suspect that many have insurance, many are underinsured. And insurance is difficult to get, and some might have lost their insurance or been canceled by insurance companies. And I think that's something we need to continue to work on, as a government at all levels, but something where there'll be gaps in assistance that we will need to bring in not only federal agencies, but nonprofits, private sector to help meet those needs.
I think we're going to have to do that. In addition, the fact is that the two declarations I signed, provide for example, the rebuilding of churches and schools and certain, but not businesses, not business centers. And so that's going to be a gigantic cost as well. But the debris removal is a big deal. And that's going to take a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it will take some time to remove the debris. In California, unfortunately, we've had a lot of experience with fighting fires and removing debris. And so it will take months to a year. This is a very widespread with significant damage to infrastructure. And we want to not only immediately remove the hazards, things like propane tanks, some of the power cells that are there, and other contaminants that may be in households, and make sure that they're safe to re-enter and re-look for personal effects. But then the second part is removing that ash, and what we've done before is help people with the removal so that we could get down the grade and then immediately start rebuilding.
All right, I appreciate what you're doing, and like you said, 360,000 people have been evacuated so far.
Sure, appreciate.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yes, sir. I just want to let you know I'm on also with the fire administrator from FEMA, who's been working with the local fire chiefs, and I didn't know if you had any questions or she wanted to add anything to this discussion. Chief Lori Moore is on.
Well, I've been talking to them, so Chief, you want to add anything to this?
I will, sir. Thank you very much. And as you might know, I've been here, got here last night. It was important to get here on the ground with the fire chiefs and the firefighters that are here. So I've been with LA County, LA City Fire Chief since last night. We're at the Palisades EOC right now, as Regional Administrator Fenton just said, with the governor, with the FEMA administrator getting the brief. The coordination of resources, it helps for us to be here, U.S. Fire Administration, as part of the response, because we're on the ground. We're able to explain ground truth and coordinate resources, streamline the communication between federal. We're also here checking on the firefighters on the front lines, and I really appreciate what you and the Vice President both said about the boots on the ground, because these are their communities, and nobody wants to fight the fire and save these communities more than these firefighters who are boots on the ground from the very moment the ignition began. So we're checking on them, and I will tell you they're exhausted. Obviously, many of them have been more than 6 hours on this now. They are able to take a quick nap sometimes in the truck, but they are on the job, and they keep fighting. And so they need to know that they matter. And so it's important that I show up with them, to see them, to say thank you, and to let them know that we are watching, that we know what they're doing. We want to make sure that we're here when injuries happen. And so we did have an injured firefighter in LA County, fell through a 3-story roof just about 2 hours ago. So several major injuries, but in the hospital. I'll be going to check on him shortly. And it's about the response too, because often while they're in the midst of the response, these chiefs can't explain everything that is happening, and there's a lot of questions, as you might imagine, and are addressing. And so it's important that we're here to help explain why the fire's moving the way it is, the fire dynamics, helping people understand. And when there's questions, as you know, about the response or about the water, to help people understand that it's not over if there's not water in the hydrants. We have tenders, we have tankers, they're doing rescue. So there's a lot of work to be done, and controlling these perimeters. There's so much work that these firefighters are doing beyond the direct suppression on these fires. And so that's why we're here, and to continue to learn, because every one of these tragedies, unfortunately, is a lesson to how to prevent the next. And so it's important that we do that as well. And so we're going to remain on the ground here, sir, on your behalf for a couple other days to make sure that we are part of this conversation.
Well, you are a part of the conversation. That's why I went out
Thank you, Mr. President.
Oh,
Madam Vice
I'm looking
President.
at
I'm right here.
the screen,
No
I know.
worries. Yeah, I surprised you.
Yeah.
We are very much leaning in here at the Defense Department. We, of course, are always looking for how we can support state and local partners, and of course our interagency partners in the federal sector that you've already heard from. And that includes every tool that we believe we can leverage that causes us to always lean forward to make sure our partners understand what we could bring and be responsive to requests that they're coming forward with. And we have been in receipt of some requests. I will turn, with your permission in a moment, to Chairman Brown, and then we also have on the screen with us the NORTHCOM Commander, General Guillot, who is our focal point for responses here in the United States homeland. Secretary Austin this morning out in Germany already in his opening remarks for the final Ukraine Defense Contact Group spoke explicitly to our intent and efforts underway now to provide search support. And so I just want to emphasize it's so important to us that he's put that front and center even while he's concluding this important work overseas. You had mentioned some of the efforts we already have underway. We are ready, as I said, to engage with our partners on further efforts. With your permission, I'll turn to Chairman Brown.
Please. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. President, Madam Vice President, as you highlight, we do have 500 personnel already identified to be able to support. Not so much in firefighting, because it takes some 10 days of training that would be required, and we don't want to pull firefighters away from that, but they can also support with rock clearance capabilities, commodity distribution. We talked about the airlift with their helicopters. There's 10 U.S. Navy helicopters as well as 10 Guard helicopters. The winds have been challenging to get them airborne. They can also help with ground search and rescue, incident response, awareness, and the medical support. Those Marines will be in place in the next 24 to 48 hours. The California National Guard also has, by tomorrow, they'll have about 1,000 service members that will be available to be able to support as well. About 250 of those actually have some firefighting capability, and they can be trained in the next 24 to 48 hours to also support firefighting. As is mentioned, the C-130s with the modular aerial firefighting system, 2 of those are already channel.
Explain what that means to the average listener.
Yeah, so what it is, it's a C-130 that's modified. It has a system that's put into a modular system that's put into the back of the C-130, and so it's able to push out either water or the slurry retardant associated with. And as was highlighted, they're usually prepared to do this during the firefighting season. This is several months prior to when they would typically do this. And so there's 2 C-130s that are already at Channel Island. They're in, just northwest of Los Angeles. The other 6 will be there within the next 24 hours or so. The first flight will start tomorrow, and then they will continue to be prepared to be able to support. We're also looking at surrounding bases that may have ability to bed down any displaced personnel or families. We've got about 1,000 beds that have been identified at either Edwards, March, or Fort Irwin there in California. In addition, we're using March Reserve Base as a incident response area and getting that set up. Mr. President, last thing I would say is what and before I turn to General Guillot, what we really try to do is identify things that we know we can lean forward on before there's even an ask. We want to make sure we cut down the timeline to get provided capability. We also want to make sure, I know that General Guillot is communicating that with Ms. Griswold from FEMA, so that we want to make sure we, as I say, provide an a la carte menu of all the things we have available. So even if they don't have time to think about it, we're already looking ahead. Last thing I would say is when I met this afternoon with my staff, the thing we also talked about is there's the immediate response, but there's also, as was highlighted, the longer term response of things that we'd have to be able to look at in recovery. And so we're already thinking ahead of what options DOD will be able to provide to support. Bidding your questions, and then I can turn
You
it
guys
to
have been immediately responsive. Thank you. I mean, you're right on top of things. But let's turn to General.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, and thank you, Chairman. Northcom, on behalf of the Department of Defense, is aggressively taking action to deliver capabilities to California as soon as they are requested. So in addition to the aircraft and ground forces and the installation support that President Biden and Chairman Brown mentioned, we've identified other capabilities such as helicopter support, search and rescue, both from the ground or from the air, commodity distribution, route clearance, and medical capabilities that we've postured and have leaned forward to make sure that they're able to deploy to California and operate just as quickly as they are requested. And to do that, we're cooperating very closely with FEMA, with the state of California, and the National Guard Bureau to deliver the right capabilities at the right time for the women and men of California.
Well, the Defense Department, I gotta say, stepped up immediately. I didn't even, matter of fact, I got a call what you need before I even asked. So thank you all. And you have incredible capacity and capabilities. It's just getting them in place as quickly as possible is the most important thing. You're doing that right now. So I think you're gonna see an awful lot of help coming based on what you want to do, what you can do, and the entire department is surging capacities, in my understanding, including the aerial equipment to fight these fires. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to speak to our Department of Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm. She will brief us on power outages and initial assessments of impacts on the power grid in Los Angeles area. And Madam Secretary, it's all yours, wherever you are.
We're looking to see if she's still on the screen. She's had to board a plane, so if she has had to board, the Deputy Secretary, Dave Turk, is sitting at the end of the table.
It looks like she is on her plane,
like
so
It's all you.
I'll give the update, Mr. President. And she's on the way, Mr. President, to Puerto Rico again on official visit, given the island-wide blackout there, and doing everything we can to help on that front per your guidance and the Vice President's direction as well. And of course, again, per your guidance, we're doing everything we can to help, working with partners, including our utility partners, but also other federal partners as well. As of just coming into this meeting, there's about a little over 400,000 customer outages in California. Important to note that these are both actual outages, power that's actually been disrupted because of the fire, but also proactive shut-offs, just as you mentioned as well, to prevent fire ignition and the spread of fire. We've got two main utilities out there, Southern Cal Edison and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and we're in close and continuing contact, including with their CEOs, Pedro and Janice as well, including calls with them just a few hours ago, just to make sure we're doing everything we can to help. We're coordinating with those utilities and with utilities literally across the country to make sure that we've got all the capabilities that we have in the federal government, but our utility partners to provide that. I want to thank you, Mr. President. You joined a call just a couple months ago with Liz and our secretary to thank all of these utility CEOs. We've got this phenomenal partnership with utilities all across the country. It's called mutual assistance. And if any utility in any one region needs help, all the other utilities, and we last unleashed this phenomenal partnership to bring 40,000 utility workers to Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, the affected regions with the two hurricanes back to back, and everybody
continue to talk to me. I've been deployed so many places.
Well, having been with the utilities out, we were all in Colorado for this meeting. They just appreciated you taking the time to thank them for their personal leadership, and it's the utility CEOs themselves who make the time for these calls going forward. We're working closely with all the utilities. We're also in continuing contact with the transmission operators. The disruption has really been at the distribution level, at the local level, but we want to make sure there's not broader outages and broader concerns. As of now, we're not seeing any issues with stability of the broader transmission system, either in the region or across California or more broadly. So that's a good news part of where we're at now, of course. We're working with the utilities trying to restore power to customers as quickly as we're able, but full restoration, of course, is going to take some time here. In particular, the comprehensive damage assessment will take time and can't begin until it's safe for crews to get in there and actually do the assessments and do the work. So we're working, Madam Vice President, as you said at the outset, with a real sense of urgency here, but also with a sense of we'll do whatever we can over the long haul to do right by our responsibilities.
David, one of the things that everybody's mentioned so far is the mental stress it's going to cause for average Americans that are caught in the middle of all this. And one of the things that, it's not, these aren't everyday, no matter how well educated one is, they're not always certain how power is transmitted, why it's transmitted the way it is, and so on. Could you explain to the folks here, the public is listening, what the impact on some of the utilities have had on the ability to generate the pumping of water? Because there's a lot of accusations going around that it's because that the local leadership didn't care. I mean, explain how this works and why it makes sense what's happened.
So this is an issue, actually, Secretary Granholm was on the phone with the CEO of Southern Cal Edison to talk exactly about this and make sure we were doing everything we can on that front. And it's both the power issue, and you mentioned generators and other ways that we can try to help solve the problem there, but it's also the pressure and making sure that we're thinking of these things holistically. And certainly my experience over the last 4 years under your leadership is it's not one department, it's not one slice of your federal government that is responsible. Energy and water issues overlap in a lot of different ways. So we work with our EPA colleagues and others to make sure that we're bringing all of our expertise and explaining it to our fellow Americans. It's important that we give transparent information and information they can rely upon.
Well, I think it's just people don't know how it functions. And for example, since I've been president, I've been in an aircraft flying over more territory where there have been wildfires, from Arizona all the way up to Idaho and beyond, and that make up an area larger than the entire state of Maryland, burned to the ground. And one of the problems has been that people don't understand that when these high winds occur, what happens is, or when these storms occur, these utility poles, these whole, those big lines you see where all the lines are on, they fall to the ground in the middle of the forest. It's not just about raking the leaves under the trees, it's about the fires that causes. And so utilities have to shut down the ability to continue to transmit on those lines. And the consequence of that, I don't think most people think, no matter how well educated they are, unless they're in the area, that there's a direct correlation between the utility company and the ability to pump water out of a hydrant. And so it allows for a lot of uninformed people to make assertions or concerns or accusations about the local officials not caring or not working. So as I understand it, the vast majority of the circumstances where the water resource has been diminished is because of the utility company not being able to maintain the electric transmission because they're getting knocked down or shutting down so they don't cause more fires.
Fires, exactly.
But now what is happening is, are we getting cooperation with utility companies to bring in generators and others to bring in generators to generate the energy to allow that fire hydrant to function? Explain that a little bit.
So this is the pragmatic can-do attitude, and folks who've been literally doing this are civil servants and others for their careers, and making sure that we're solutions-oriented. We sometimes call our department the solutions department, as Liz knows from having been Deputy Secretary of the Department of Energy. And so whatever gets the power on to allow the water, whatever gets the job done, a lot of times it's working with our defense colleagues who have terrific assets that can be brought in quite quickly. The other point I'd like to make, Mr. President, to thank you and the Vice President's leadership and our folks in Congress, your bipartisan infrastructure legislation actually provided $10 billion. It's a GRIP program for grid resiliency to improve the resilience of our grids so that when the grids do go down, they come back on quicker. That's $10 billion that we've already gotten out the door and is being invested in communities all across the country. We need more of that. We need continued focus on infrastructure, but infrastructure matters.
It matters a great deal because, for example, one of the things that I knew, but I didn't know that I didn't put a number on it. It'd be a lot easier if these electric lines are running underground in contained vessels. So in the middle of forest, so there's nothing that, I mean, but it costs what, 6 times more?
It can cost 6 times more, and we're doing a lot more undergrounding thanks to your leadership on the infrastructure funding. It's not cost effective everywhere, and
Some places it's necessary.
some places it's absolutely necessary, and we need to have the funding and support to do that as quickly as we can.
Well, I think we're moving in the right direction. I know it, look, this is really, really, really difficult for families to have to deal with it. I mean, the imp, you know, I have a family member who lives out there, and the area where he lives, I'm not getting into detail where he lives, I think there are something like 240 or 260 homes that burned to the ground, all but 14 or 15 of them. And everybody has to evacuate. And people are going, when do I get back? Will I ever find that picture album? Will I ever find the jewelry that my grandmom gave me? Will I ever, I mean, there's so much anxiety that's generated. And I think that we've been through this once before in Hawaii where the fires occurred and we're trying to build back up the community so they could open up and things be running. But it's really, really, really hard. So I'm going to make an appeal right now to the United States Congress. They're going to have to step up when we ask for more help to get these people the kind of shelter they need, to get the kind of help they need, because it really does matter. And you guys do, I'm not being solicitous, you all do a hell of a job. Mm-hmm. And we've learned, unfortunately, so much. And there is, in case you haven't noticed, there is global warming. It does change weather patterns. And as you explained, Randy, wind's going in and wind's coming out. You get the one going in, but you don't want the one coming back out. And so my point is that I think the more we can explain to the American people in plain, straightforward, honest English or whatever language of us understand what exactly is happening, the more likely we're likely to get the kind of support and not make a political deal out of this. I'm leaving this office very shortly, but it's not about the politics. It's about giving people some sense of security that we're going to be able to get this under control, but it's going to take time. And it's going to take time. And like I said, in the next little bit, we're going to be going back to Congress asking for some more help on some of this stuff. And I hope they're ready to step up because we can afford it. And like I said, we have a little infrastructure bill that's over $1 trillion. It's going to be able to help a little bit. We have done a lot in terms of what we're going to do in terms of providing for this rebuilding of communities. And so I think the most important thing we have to do, those of us sitting around this table and on the screen, is explain in simple, straightforward language what the capacity we have is, how we're using that capacity, and what capacity we don't have that we need. And in order to keep things from just all these, in crisis, rumors and fear spread very quickly. And the most important thing is to just bring this down in an area, be honest with people, what's at stake, but be straightforward with them. What can be done and how we're going to get it done. So I thank you all very much. I'm proud of the job you're all doing. And I'm, quite frankly, proud of the job the local officials in California are doing. I've spent a lot of time with the governor and the mayor of Los Angeles and others. You know, they're doing everything that we ask of them and beyond. And so we're stepping up as best way we can. Any of my colleagues around the table or on the screen want to add anything before we close this out?
Well, as the Californian at the table, thank you for all of the leadership that everyone here has provided, starting with our president. We are beyond the point of calling it fire season.
Yeah, that's right.
we really, and we're seeing this around the country, that whereas years before we would talk about a particular season of extreme weather, we are seeing that it doesn't matter what month of the year, we should be ready. The work that our administration has done in particular on the issue of infrastructure, together with the Inflation Reduction Act and the attention we are paying to the climate crisis, is so important, because we have got to invest as a country in adaptation, and we have to invest in resilience. And that is about homeowners, that is about families, that is about cities and local governments, state governments, and we have to adapt to this changing climate. For example, fire hydrants are pretty much built to deal with an individual house fire, not with a wildfire that is taking on entire residential communities, where these homes are providing the fuel for that fire to grow. We have to put more resources into our fire departments and firefighters, understanding that we are asking a lot of them that traditionally they never had to do. And because of their commitment to their profession, they're attempting to rise to the moment of crisis. But we need to put more resources into those individual professionals and into the departments that sustain that work with the mission. That is such an important mission in times like this. So, Mr. President, I thank you for your leadership, your foresight to understand what over these last 4 years we could do to leapfrog in front of what we know to be a changing climate to meet these types of moments. And God bless all of the people who are on the ground right now in California doing that work.
I thank you for your comments, and I think I totally agree with you, which will not surprise anybody. Look, there's an expression from a famous Irish poet. He said, all's changed utterly. A terrible beauty has been born. All has changed in the weather. Climate change is real, fundamentally altering, not just here, but around the world. Around the world, what's going on. And we've got to adjust to it. We've got to adjust to it. And we can. It's within our power to do it, but we've got to acknowledge it to begin with. Just acknowledge that there's a change taking place, that we're not going to be able to legislate away. It's real. There is global warming. It's real. It's having a profound impact, and where it goes from here, I don't know, but I know one thing. We have the capacity to respond to it if we, in fact, exercise our good judgment. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Mr. President, do you trust that California will get the aid they need in the next administration?
I'm not in a position to answer that question. I pray God they will.
Do you have enough time?
Mr. President, do you have a sense of how much this is going to cost in the end?
No, the truth of the matter is no one can tell you that. For example, just clearing the debris. You saw what happened when we were dealing with the hurricanes that occurred from North Carolina to Florida. The cost of the debris cleanup is gigantic, gigantic. The cost of replacing the housing is almost exponential. I mean, we don't know what it is, but we know one thing we have to do. We have to stay with it. We have the capacity to do it, but we don't know that. Anybody gives you a number now, they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. It's a big, big, big number.
Mr. President, let's go, guys.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Mr. President, can you update us, please, on the Hamas hostages and what you think of the incoming administration's efforts and ultimatum?
I can, but I'm not sure it's appropriate for now. We're making some real progress. I met with negotiators today. I think there's what's going on right now in Lebanon is we finally have a president. He's a first-rate guy. I spent time on the phone with him today, about 20 minutes to half an hour, what they have planned. They're also working very hard with the Lebanese military, accountable to the Lebanese people, not Hamas, not Hezbollah, not any other group. And so I think we're seeing some progress. And you know, I know hope springs eternal, but I'm still hopeful that we'll be able to have a prisoner exchange. Hamas is the one getting in the way of that exchange right now, but I think we may be able to get that done. We need to get it done. Thank you all very much.
What else can you do to help Ukraine before you give your life?
Everything they need.